Welcome back to the Emma podcast. I'm Anna, and today I'm joined by Eric.
Each episode, we break down the strategic, regulatory, and operational realities shaping the life sciences industry. And today, we're tackling a topic that has moved from long term consideration to immediate priority for many organizations: reshoring.
Specifically, reshoring life sciences manufacturing back to the United States and what it really takes to do it with speed, compliance, and supply chain control.
This is a conversation we're having constantly with pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies. Supply chain disruptions, geopolitical risk, regulatory pressure, and quality concerns have fundamentally changed how companies think about where and how they manufacture.
For years, globalized manufacturing was the default. Lower costs, large scale capacity, and established overseas suppliers made offshoring attractive. But the risks embedded in those models have become impossible to ignore.
The pandemic exposed vulnerabilities that many organizations knew existed but hadn't fully accounted for. Long lead times, limited visibility into suppliers, regulatory challenges when issues arise thousands of miles away.
And it didn't stop there. Geopolitical instability, trade uncertainty, and increasing regulatory scrutiny have continued to add pressure. For many companies, the question is no longer whether to reshore, but how fast they can do it without creating new risks.
That's where reshoring becomes a strategic decision, not just an operational one. Bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. affects regulatory pathways, quality systems, workforce planning, facility design, and cost structures all at once.
Speed is often the first driver. Companies want control over timelines. They want faster decision making, faster tech transfers, and faster response when issues arise. Domestic manufacturing makes that possible, but only if it's planned correctly.
Compliance is the second driver and arguably the most critical. Reshoring doesn't reduce regulatory expectations. In many cases, it increases them. FDA oversight is direct, inspections are frequent, and documentation standards are unforgiving.
Organizations that assume reshoring is simply a physical move often underestimate the regulatory lift involved. Facility readiness, validation, quality system implementation, and change control all have to be addressed in parallel.
And then there's supply chain control. Reshoring isn't just about moving a facility. It's about rethinking suppliers, raw materials, logistics, and contingency planning.
Domestic manufacturing only delivers resilience if the upstream and downstream supply chain is equally robust. Otherwise, companies risk recreating the same vulnerabilities in a different location.
One of the biggest mistakes we see is companies treating reshoring as a last-minute reaction, a response to a warning letter, a supply disruption, or an inspection finding. When reshoring is reactive, timelines slip, costs escalate, and compliance risk increases.
The organizations that succeed are the ones that approach reshoring deliberately. They start with strategic planning and feasibility assessments. They understand regulatory impact before they break ground, and they align quality, regulatory, and engineering teams from day one.
Another important point is that reshoring doesn't look the same for every organization. API manufacturing, sterile injectables, biologics, diagnostics, and medical devices all come with very different technical and regulatory requirements.
Reshoring a fill finish operation is not the same as relocating a medical device assembly line. Each modality requires tailored facility design, validation strategy, and regulatory planning.
Workforce readiness is another critical factor that often gets overlooked. Bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. means building or augmenting teams that understand FDA expectations, aseptic techniques, data integrity, and GMP operations.
That includes not just hiring, but training, onboarding, and ongoing qualification. A state of the art facility without a qualified workforce is still a compliance risk.
From a regulatory standpoint, reshoring almost always triggers change control. New facilities, new equipment, new suppliers, and new processes all need to be assessed for impact on existing approvals.
That can involve NDA or ANDA supplements, 510K submissions, PMA updates, or other regulatory notifications depending on the product. Understanding those pathways early is critical to avoiding launch delays.
What we're seeing more and more is that reshoring is becoming an integrated effort. It's not just regulatory or just engineering. It's quality, regulatory, validation, operations, and supply chain working together toward a shared goal.
In this episode, we're going to unpack what reshoring really looks like in practice, how companies can move quickly without cutting corners, what regulators expect to see when manufacturing comes back stateside, and how to build supply chain control that actually reduces risk instead of shifting it.
Because reshoring life sciences manufacturing can be done right, but only when speed, compliance, and control are treated as equally important.
And that's where this conversation really begins.
Once organizations commit to reshoring, the first real test comes during strategic planning and feasibility. This is where assumptions meet reality. Costs, timelines, regulatory impact, and operational complexity all need to be evaluated together, not in isolation.
A common mistake is focusing too narrowly on facility build out or equipment procurement without fully understanding the regulatory ripple effects. Moving manufacturing locations almost always affects filings, approvals, and inspection readiness. Ignoring that early can create delays that erase any perceived speed advantage. And
That's why feasibility assessments need to be multidisciplinary. Market demand, cost modeling, regulatory strategy, and supply chain risk all have to be considered at the same time. A decision that looks attractive financially may introduce unacceptable compliance risk if not properly planned.
regulatory impact analysis is especially critical at this stage. Reshoring can trigger a wide range of regulatory actions depending on product type. For pharmaceuticals, this may involve NDA or ANDA supplements, comparability assessments, and updated validation data. For medical devices, it could mean 510K supplements, PMA amendments, or documentation updates tied to manufacturing changes.
Understanding the scope of those requirements early allows companies to sequence activities intelligently. Facility design, equipment qualification, and process validation can be aligned with submission timelines instead of working against them.
Site selection is another area where speed and compliance intersect. Not all locations are created equal. Zoning, utilities, environmental controls, and access to qualified labor all influence how quickly a facility can become GMP ready.
Companies that rush site selection often find themselves redesigning layouts or retrofitting systems later to meet clean room, environmental monitoring, or material flow requirements. Those changes add time, cost, and validation complexity.
Facility readiness is about more than physical space. It's about designing workflows that support compliance. Material segregation, personnel flow, contamination control, and data capture all need to be considered during layout planning.
This is particularly important for sterile manufacturing, biologics, and combination products. Small design decisions can have outsized impact on contamination risk, inspection outcomes, and operational efficiency.
As facilities take shape, quality systems need to develop in parallel. One of the biggest risks in reshoring is waiting too long to implement a compliant QMS. Quality systems are not something that can be bolted on at the end.
SOPs, training programs, deviation management, CAPA, change control, and supplier quality all need to be operational before production begins. Regulators expect systems to be in place, not in draft form.
Validation is another area where reshoring timelines can slip if not managed carefully. Equipment qualification, process validation, cleaning validation, and computerized system validation all take time, coordination, and documentation.
Organizations that underestimate validation effort often find themselves scrambling to catch up, especially when inspections occur sooner than expected. Building validation into the project plan from day one helps avoid that scenario.
Supply chain restructuring is happening alongside all of this. Reshoring offers an opportunity to rationalize vendors, qualify domestic suppliers, and reduce reliance on high risk sources. But that transition must be managed carefully.
New suppliers require qualification, audits, and ongoing oversight. Raw material changes may require comparability assessments or regulatory notifications. These activities take time and need to be coordinated with production plans.
Workforce scaling adds another layer of complexity. Hiring qualified QA, validation, regulatory, and operations staff is often one of the biggest bottlenecks in reshoring projects.
Even when talent is available, onboarding and training take time. Staff need to understand not just how to operate equipment, but how to operate within FDA expectations. That includes documentation practices, deviation handling, and inspection readiness.
Contingent labor and professional services often play a key role here. Augmenting internal teams with experienced professionals can accelerate timelines while maintaining compliance, especially during peak validation and startup phases.
As operations come online, inspection readiness becomes a reality much sooner than many organizations expect. Domestic facilities often attract regulatory attention quickly, particularly if they're tied to critical products or recent changes.
Being inspection ready means more than having documents organized. It means staff can confidently explain processes, quality systems are actively used, and leadership understands regulatory commitments.
What becomes clear through all of this is that reshoring success depends on integration. Speed, compliance, and supply chain control can't be optimized independently. Gains in one area often create pressure in another if not managed holistically.
Organizations that approach reshoring as a coordinated effort with regulatory, quality, engineering, and operations aligned are far more likely to meet timelines without sacrificing compliance.
And as reshoring becomes more common across life sciences, the companies that build this capability now will be better positioned for the next wave of regulatory and supply chain challenges.
Because reshoring isn't just about bringing manufacturing back, it's about rebuilding control, resilience, and confidence in how products are made.
As reshoring projects move from planning into execution, the pressure to maintain momentum increases. Timelines tighten, capital is committed, and expectations from leadership rise. This is often the point where trade offs are tempted, especially between speed and compliance.
One of the most common challenges we see at this stage is parallel execution. Facility build out, equipment installation, validation, quality system implementation, regulatory submissions, and workforce onboarding are all happening at the same time. Without strong coordination, dependencies get missed and rework follows.
That's why project governance becomes critical. Clear ownership, defined decision-making authority, and integrated project management help prevent delays that can cascade across work streams.
Validation sequencing is one area where missteps can have outsized impact. Equipment qualification, utilities validation, and process validation need to be aligned with production plans and regulatory commitments. Skipping steps or compressing timelines without justification creates compliance risk that often surfaces during inspections.
Another frequent issue is underestimating the complexity of tech transfer. Moving processes from overseas facilities to domestic sites involves more than shipping equipment and SOPs. Differences in utilities, raw materials, operators, and environmental conditions all affect process performance.
Successful tech transfer requires structured knowledge transfer, detailed gap assessments, and often process optimization. Documentation must reflect the new reality, not just replicate legacy practices.
Data integrity also becomes more visible as operations ramp up. Domestic facilities are expected to meet high standards for electronic records, audit trails, access control, and system validation. Legacy systems that were tolerated elsewhere may not pass scrutiny under FDA oversight.
Addressing data integrity early avoids painful remediation later. That includes validating computerized systems, defining data flows, and training staff on proper documentation practices.
Supplier qualification is another area that can slow reshoring if not planned carefully. New domestic suppliers may reduce geopolitical risk, but they still require thorough assessment, audits, and onboarding.
Raw material changes can affect product quality and regulatory filings. Companies need to understand when comparability data or regulatory notifications are required and build those activities into timelines.
Workforce readiness continues to be a major factor. Even with strong hiring pipelines, building a cohesive, inspection ready team takes time. Cultural differences between legacy and new operations can create inconsistency if not addressed.
Leadership engagement plays an important role here. When leadership emphasizes compliance and quality as non negotiable, teams are less likely to take shortcuts under pressure.
As operations stabilize, attention turns to sustaining control. Deviations, investigations, and CAPAs begin to occur as normal operations encounter variability. How these issues are handled sets the tone for regulatory confidence.
Regulators pay close attention to how organizations respond to issues, not just whether issues occur. Timely investigations, thoughtful root cause analysis, and effective corrective actions build trust.
Inspection readiness becomes an ongoing state rather than a one time event. Domestic manufacturing sites should expect inspections early and often, particularly if they support critical products.
Being ready means leadership can speak to strategy, operators understand procedures, and documentation reflects reality. Inspections are not about perfection, they're about control and understanding.
Another important aspect of reshoring execution is communication with regulators. Proactive engagement, transparent updates, and timely submissions reduce surprises and demonstrate accountability.
Organizations that go silent during major transitions often create concern. Those that communicate clearly tend to navigate change more smoothly.
Over time, reshoring efforts begin to deliver the intended benefits. Supply chains shorten, visibility improves, decision making accelerates. Quality issues are addressed faster because teams are closer to operations.
But those benefits only materialize when reshoring is executed with discipline. Speed without structure leads to rework. Compliance without coordination leads to delay. Supply chain control without oversight recreates risk.
The organizations that succeed are the ones that treat reshoring as a transformation, not just a relocation. They build systems, teams, and processes designed for resilience.
And as more life sciences companies pursue reshoring, the ability to execute these transitions effectively will become a defining capability.
Because reshoring is no longer an exception. It's becoming part of how the industry responds to uncertainty, risk, and the need for greater control.
As reshoring initiatives mature, another shift begins to emerge around how organizations measure success. Early on, success is often defined by hitting milestones: facility ready, equipment installed, first batch produced, but over time, the definition becomes more nuanced.
True success in reshoring is demonstrated through sustained control, consistent product quality, predictable regulatory interactions, supply chains that hold up under pressure instead of fracturing at the first disruption.
That's where many organizations realize reshoring isn't a finish line. It's an operating model, one that requires ongoing attention, governance, and refinement.
A key part of sustaining that model is continuous quality oversight. Domestic manufacturing sites generate more data, more visibility, and more regulatory touchpoints. That information needs to be actively reviewed and used, not just archived.
Trend analysis, management review, and risk assessment become central activities. They allow organizations to spot issues early and make informed decisions before problems escalate.
This level of oversight also changes how companies approach audits and inspections. Instead of preparing reactively, teams operate in a constant state of readiness. Documentation is current. Procedures reflect reality. Training records are up to date.
That readiness reduces stress and builds confidence, not just internally, but with regulators as well. Inspectors can quickly see whether systems are working as intended.
Another important evolution is how companies manage change post reshoring. Manufacturing processes don't remain static. Improvements are identified. Capacity is expanded. New products are added.
Each of those changes introduces regulatory considerations. Organizations that have strong change control and regulatory impact assessment processes are able to adapt without disruption.
This is especially important for companies with multiple products or platforms. Changes made for one product can affect others if systems aren't clearly segmented and controlled.
Supply chain control also continues to evolve. Initial reshoring efforts often focus on replacing overseas suppliers with domestic ones. Over time, the focus shifts to resilience.
That means qualifying multiple suppliers, monitoring performance continuously, and maintaining contingency plans. Domestic does not automatically mean low risk. Supplier oversight remains critical.
Another area where maturity shows is in workforce development. Early hiring and training efforts eventually give way to long term talent strategies. Retention, cross training, and leadership development become priorities.
A stable, knowledgeable workforce is one of the most powerful risk mitigators in manufacturing. Experienced teams are better equipped to handle deviations, inspections, and change.
Organizations that invest in people alongside infrastructure tend to see more consistent outcomes. Technology and facilities matter, but people ultimately operate and sustain systems.
There's also a broader strategic implication to successful reshoring. Companies that regain control over manufacturing are often able to innovate faster. Design changes can be tested more quickly. Feedback loops shorten.
That agility supports competitive advantage, especially in markets where speed to market and reliability matter.
From a regulatory perspective, this agility must still be managed carefully. Faster change cycles increase the importance of disciplined documentation and communication.
Regulators want to see that innovation is controlled, not chaotic. Clear rationale, risk assessment, and validation remain essential.
As reshoring becomes more common across the industry, expectations will continue to rise. What was once considered ambitious will become standard practice.
Organizations that build strong foundations now will be better positioned as scrutiny increases and regulatory frameworks evolve.
Another long-term benefit of reshoring is institutional learning. Teams gain experience navigating complex transitions, managing regulators through change, and operating under heightened visibility.
That experience strengthens the organization beyond a single project. It becomes part of corporate capability.
And as global uncertainty persists, that capability becomes increasingly valuable. Companies with domestic manufacturing options have more flexibility to respond to disruptions, policy changes, and market shifts.
Reshoring, in that sense, is about optionality. It gives organizations choices when conditions change.
But that optionality only exists if reshoring is executed thoughtfully. Rushed decisions, under-resourced teams, or fragmented governance undermine the very control companies seek.
What ultimately distinguishes successful reshoring efforts is intentional design. Design of facilities, design of quality systems, design of regulatory strategy, design of supply chains.
When those elements are aligned, speed, compliance, and control reinforce each other instead of competing.
And that alignment is what allows reshoring to deliver on its promise, not just bringing manufacturing back to the US, but rebuilding confidence in how life science products are made, monitored, and delivered.
That confidence is what sustains operations long after the headlines fade and the project teams move on.
And it's what turns reshoring from a reaction to risk into a long term strategic advantage.
As all of these pieces come together, what becomes clear is that reshoring life sciences manufacturing is not a short-term fix. It's a structural shift in how companies think about control, risk, and accountability.
The organizations that approach reshoring as a checkbox exercise often struggle. They may achieve physical relocation, but without sustained compliance, supply chain resilience, and operational maturity, the underlying risks remain.
In contrast, companies that treat reshoring as a transformation tend to see lasting benefits. They build facilities designed for compliance. They implement quality systems that are active, not theoretical. And they develop teams that understand both the science and the regulatory environment they operate in.
Speed remains important, but not at the expense of discipline. The fastest reshoring projects are often the ones that slow down early to plan properly. Clear regulatory strategy, realistic timelines, and integrated execution prevent costly rework later.
Compliance, too, becomes more manageable when it's designed in from the start. Instead of reacting to inspections or findings, organizations operate with confidence, knowing their systems are built to withstand scrutiny.
Supply chain control is the third pillar that sustains reshoring over time. Domestic manufacturing only delivers resilience when suppliers are qualified, monitored, and diversified. Control is not about proximity alone, it's about visibility and governance.
As regulatory expectations continue to rise and global uncertainty persists, these capabilities become increasingly valuable. Companies that invest in them now are better positioned to respond to change rather than be disrupted by it.
Reshoring also reshapes how organizations engage with regulators. Domestic operations bring more frequent interaction, greater transparency, and higher expectations. Companies that embrace that reality tend to build stronger, more productive regulatory relationships.
Over time, reshoring becomes less about geography and more about mindset, a mindset focused on accountability, preparedness, and continuous improvement.
That mindset supports not only compliance, but innovation. When manufacturing is stable and controlled, teams can focus on improving products, processes, and patient outcomes.
Ultimately, reshoring life sciences manufacturing is about reclaiming confidence, confidence in supply chains, confidence in quality systems, and confidence in the ability to deliver safe, effective products consistently.
When speed, compliance, and supply chain control are aligned, reshoring becomes a strategic advantage rather than a reactive necessity.
And that's what makes reshoring such a critical topic for life sciences companies today.
Thank you for joining us for today's deep dive. If your organization needs support preparing for remote inspections, enhancing your risk based regulatory strategy, or modernizing your quality systems, Emma International is here to help. You can reach us anytime at info@emmainternational.com or visit us at emmainternational.com.
Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay innovative.